Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Associate Editor Gemma Cray.
And I'm Editor Stephen Galvin. Today we present Screen Sessions, a series of conversations between filmmakers, kindly supported by Screen Ireland.
Internationally renowned animator Nora Twomey is the co-founder of Cartoon Saloon, and her work co-directing The Secret of Kells and directing The Breadwinner has earned her 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Animated Feature.
Nora is talking to Jessica Patterson, an award-winning director and filmmaker from Dublin.
All right, so Jess, how's your day going so far?
You know what? It's not too bad. I know we're pretty okay. We're I'm doing some we're doing some TV production at the moment with a company in Denmark, and so we're kind of maybe like 3-4 episodes in, so we've got like a nice kind of groove going on. But it's not been a bad Monday, kind of light on the calls and so on. So how's your day been?
Good, yeah, good. It's funny having different hats like producer, director, and then like studio partner as well, and that kind of. So it's funny, like the budget of things, the deadline and schedule of things, and then you're involved creatively even when you're producing things, but you kind of know a bit too much, kind of, so in ways. So it's an interesting thing to have 5 or 6 hats half on my head or something like that, rather than or several hats on at the same time or something. So it's a funny old thing, but I honestly I don't know any different. I mean, we've been doing this since making short films. So yeah, it's another day of wearing lots and lots of hats. So you're directing at the moment, Jess?
I'm the episodic director on the series at the moment. It's a little preschool series we're working on. And I think it should be announced kind of soon enough. But the production is happening up in Belfast, and then we're working with a partner in Denmark at the same time. So yeah, it's going good. We're in animation at the moment, and I'm gonna complete maybe. I think our first fall episode should be done maybe this week, which is very exciting. We can finally see it all moving.
Amazing. And when you're working like in co-production and things like that, like do you meet the team, the whole team many times, or do you rely a lot on kind of virtual meetings and things?
Sure. I have mostly relied on virtual at the moment. We're kind of spread out. We've got a few people in the UK, a few people in Ireland, Denmark primarily as well, and then a big old team in Belfast. And so we've been kind of relying on Zoom a good bit, but I've been lucky enough to get to go over to a writer's workshop or 2 over in London. So got to meet people in person, which is really nice. And I think we met originally at the very beginning in like CMC, which was really fun. So we didn't know if anything was going to happen from there, but it was nice to put faces to names in person in Sheffield, which was great.
Excellent.
What about yourself? Do you normally get to meet everyone in person, or?
No, well, you wouldn't get to meet everyone, I guess. Like, so yeah, we do work in co-productions a lot, like for example with Puff and Rock, the preschool show that we have a couple of series of, and have a feature. We work a lot with Northern Ireland as well in Derry, dog ears, and so you wouldn't get to meet. I wouldn't anyway. All of the team. And not in person. In the early days we did a lot of like dinners in each other's places and did a lot of driving and all that kind of stuff. But then it becomes kind of like a well-oiled machine, and you kind of can predict the problem. Like when things go into series, and you kind of know how things are going to go, and especially if you're returning to older relationships and older properties where what's going to happen with them and how they work, you tend not to need to, because not so much hits the fan, I suppose.
Yeah, no, completely. And like it is funny as well, like I feel what you're saying about kind of really making those relationships and making a real effort at the beginning as well. But it's quite a kind of close-knit industry in Ireland that I think once you do build those relationships to get to know people, it is nice that you can kind of step back and let each team do their thing and kind of check in every other week or weekly really, for depending on the gig.
Yeah, you rely on each other's strengths and you know each other's weaknesses. I think that's that's the thing. And because every co-production or every time that you're working with another studio feels like a marriage, or it's as serious as a marriage, because your financial relationships are dependent on each other, and your working creative relationships, everything is dependent on each other. So once you know someone, or like, and someone by like, another company, yeah, it's good to keep those relationships going because you can build then and your studios kind of grow together as well, which is great.
You share, and you're very likely to meet people as well. And like I know this kind of social scene in animation in Ireland is pretty great, and there's plenty of festivals and conferences and things. So it's always nice to be able to kind of catch people in person and obviously want to be mates with everyone as well. Keep those kind of friendly relationships.
And you're based in Belfast?
Yeah, I'm based in Belfast. We've been up here since 2016, I think. Yeah,
Wow.
I on a graduate scheme, and it was meant to be for like 6 months. And 6 months turned into like another kind of like, oh, do you want to stay on for another 6 months? And of course I said yeah. And it's didn't end up moving back or anything. So it was great though because I have a couple of kind of like very good close knit friends who we were all in college together, and we all ended up in Belfast at a very similar time. So we kind of just moved. Basically, a group of us kind of just all moved up at the same time. So that was like a nice comfort. Plus we're not too far away from home. It's not like we moved like miles across the sea or anything. We're all kind of homebodies.
Had there been much of an animation scene up there before Jam set up there in Belfast? I say up there like this because I'm Kilkenny centric. But.
Oh, of course, yeah. A little bit further, yeah. It's do you know what, there was, I think, like they have a great course in Ulster University, and that's maybe a bit more kind of CG oriented and kind of games. There's a big games presence in Belfast. But I think in the last like maybe 10, 15 years though, there's been a real boom. So there's Jam, I think setting up their production studio probably helped a good bit. But then there's Paper Owl and 16 South as well, who are and the Dog Ears obviously up in Derry, and we've got Alt Animation as well. I'm probably missing some people, but there's a really nice kind of rounded base for animators, and they do a lovely mix of kind of 2D, CG, a bit of everything. So it's I think it's like it's growing. It's maybe not as big as Dublin, but there's a lot of kind of a few conferences and things as well. So I think they're trying to get the community really going and established here for sure. There's a lot of artists will come over though from kind of, we've had like people from Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. So it seems to draw people, which is nice. Like you do get like a nice multinational crew as well.
Lovely.
It's great for such a kind of smaller city. But
excellent.
You know for sure you've drawn everyone to Kilkenny. Kilkenny's had a huge influx of creatives.
Yeah, at this point now between Cartoon Saloon and Lighthouse Studios here in Kilkenny, and then there's some smaller studios and kind of one person operations and that as well. And a lot of people freelance themselves, and they don't it's not like it was, I don't know, 15 years ago where if you were in a smaller place and you had a contract for a year or something like that, and then the contract ran out, and then was another 6 months before you found something else or whatever. Like most people freelance from anywhere now, and while a lot of things are conditional on funding, as in you have to be in Ireland or whatever, then but you don't necessarily have to be tied to the studio and coming in 9 to 5 every day, or you don't, or I mean, I know a lot of people who came here for a job and then left, or their contract ended, and then just freelance for anywhere. You can just keep the same hours as Australia or US or whatever you want.
It is pretty brilliant. Like I know up an art director a friend of mine works with, and they work a couple of months on in Northern Ireland, and then they head off somewhere sunny, and they work remotely, and it kind of works, and they come back in a couple of months later. But they've got the lovely kind of balance of that, where they've really kind of worked out a system that works great for them, to take advantage of that, being able to freelance wherever you need to be.
I'm imagining having a Cintiq on the beach and just the tide coming in and having to move the Cintiq every 5 minutes just to beat the tide.
Yeah. I think that's going.
So creatively speaking then, right? Because I'm just looking at your gorgeous work, and what really strikes me about your short films and is the kind of brilliant economy, right? So you're so intelligent and emotionally intelligent about I suppose the needs of your audience, what's enough and what's too much, and so you find the lovely space of just not giving your audience too much, right? And then not relying on dialogue if you don't need to rely on dialogue. Finding your own version of symbolism, familiarizing your audience with that, and then taking them on a journey with it. And that's pretty amazing. Were you born with that?
Oh God,
Or is there a course I can sign up for?
I'm absolutely flummoxed. I'm so glad that you think that and that that came across. I think as a creative, I guess, and especially with animation, it's such a slow process that you never really feel or never really know for sure, like whether these ideas have come across to the audience, or you're kind of just crossing your fingers and hoping, or that like the style makes sense, and so it isn't just looking at it like, why are there stickmen running across the screen, or why are they so simplified? So that's amazing that that actually came across, and I'm delighted.
That's really
But
striking.
yeah, I guess that, you know, like I have to say it was probably studying in the study then IADT, and I think I was like massively influenced by like artists like Eamon O'Neill and Alan Holly and Louise Bagel as well. I'm just like rattling off the celebrities of Irish animation, but they I think seeing how, especially I think Eamon O'Neill's work, like the really simplified characters and just like what you could do with them, I guess. It's kind of like I want to do that. I want to learn how to do that. And I think there's always going to be artists who are maybe like who are stronger draftsmen, who are like amazing character designers and can create these really complicated designs. But yeah, I think I kind of prefer almost simplifying things down and playing with the story or playing with the emotion maybe a bit more, because yeah, it's I think I've just lent into that. I'll just keep babbling away.
No, this is not bad. This is amazing. This is creative juice. Like so right. So it's like you distill things, right? Or you distill an idea from the real world or whatever, and you know, and you distill it down to its kind of essential components, and then you put that up on
Yeah,
the screen in this really gorgeous kind of
thanks for mentioning. Yeah,
beautiful way.
that's I'm gonna steal that for steal that. That's the next time I have to talk about it. It's that, yeah, no, I think that in a nutshell would really be it. But I think it's like artists like yourself and like obviously like the guys at Saloon and everyone, like I feel like it's almost like a bit of an Irish style. Like I think it's come from learning from you as artists, and like seeing, I think like most recently for me, you know, the Breadwinner I think was something that I remember watching it. It's one of maybe two films I've seen animated features where I completely forgot it was an animated feature. You're just completely hooked on what's happening on screen, and then you realize you're, oh my God, this is animated. It's normally, for me anyway, I'll be watching an animated short or a feature and wondering how people drew that or how they came up with this idea, or looking at the backgrounds and appreciating the art of it. But I got so wrapped up in the story and the characters that you guys achieved with the Breadwinner. Like, so I think you guys have completely influenced like generations of styles.
Oh, that's that
Like,
lovely, lovely. It's funny because that when you said that, but that was actually a goal. I remember with Dara, the editor on that, just talking about like how can we make people, you know, yeah, forget they're watching an animated film. And then sometimes people say it like it's a compliment because animation is not real or it's not real film, right? To be
oh
animated, you know, you
no,
get that,
yeah,
as well. I don't know if you get that, but you certainly do.
yeah,
So it's kind of funny, you know, the whole, animation is not a genre. It's a medium and all of this, you know, and so I remember actually with the Breadwinner, because the subject matter and the film itself and the story, and it was overwhelming at times, and so sometimes I would just use like a taxi ride or an Uber ride. If the taxi driver said like what you do, I'd start telling them the story, just to see if I could get it straight in my own head, but
sure.
what the essence of the film was, and if I did a good job telling the story, say, I had more than one taxi driver kind of go, "Would you not think of making a real film about that?" You know, and not,
Yeah, oh,
yeah. I'm like, it is
good fingers are up.
animation, it's real. But it's funny because
Yeah,
it can be more real because again, like with your work, you're taking kind of universal truths or something that comes across everybody's mind when they or just the loneliness of being yourself, and then finding somebody that you can connect with, all of these kind of lovely ideas, and again, yeah, that kind of are part of what it is to be human. But the distillation again, like of what you can do with animation, means that you can explore it in a way that brings your audience along more. Do
yeah,
you feel that?
100%. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I remember back in maybe third or fourth year trying to think of your dissertation concept and everything for that. And we just learned about like altruism and all that kind of sense of the word. And to me, I think, yeah, I know people will probably get some film buffs coming at me after this, but I think like animation and is like goes hand in hand with being an author. Like you can control everything. You can literally like from beginning to end. I know it's a hugely collaborative process and space, but you can really, it's probably the one thing that you have complete control over everything that goes onto the screen. And yeah, I'm gonna hold that till I die. That's as animation being top dog, I think, in terms of filmmaking. But that's from a completely biased opinion as well as an animation nut. But I do think it's so
Yeah.
important.
And do you feel like as a director that you want to, because I know like for example, Joanna Quinn, even though she works with a wonderful team of animators on some of her shorts and that she feels like she loves the medium of short because she can touch every frame, right? So she can, quinify, as she calls it, like every frame by being part of that drawing or put and do you feel the same as a director, and especially with shorts?
A little bit. Like I think I've been influenced maybe a bit too much by working in children's TV production, because I love that kind of fast-paced environment. And as I mentioned, it's like I'm very aware that there's like artists and animators who are much stronger than I am in terms of like what they do and their kind of craft. And I kind of love that I can take an overall part in everything rather than just focus on animation. So I think
Yeah.
I don't know if I think I don't know if I could ever be like a Joanna Quinn, and like that's like almost like a complete lifestyle. I think you have to like really live and breathe your short films. Well, I think I'm a little bit more scattered, where I love a project for maybe a shorter amount of time, and I love having artists come on board and kind of take part and almost just improve it from what I know I can do myself, for sure. But I think that's the great thing about animation is like it's kind of open to multiple or directors can direct in multiple ways. As well. After me just talking about auteurism, I'm not one, but at least I think it definitely animation gives you the space. I think for one, or to be one if you want to be. I probably
Can't if you want 20 years to make your
yeah.
own. It's
I think
going to take 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And
No.
what about yourself? Would you like? Because I know you started with short films and like, but obviously like it's a hugely short films into feature. Do you kind of hold like a kind of a flame for short films overall, or is like, or how do you see the difference?
Yeah, it's funny because some people say like, are you a short filmmaker kind of thing, or do you think of it as a stepping stone to like features and all this kind of stuff? But it's not. It is very much its own thing, and it's wonderful because you can explore an idea. You don't necessarily have to explore a beginning, middle, and end and bring a character on this emotional, arc or whatever. You can literally just concentrate on, different shapes of snowflakes, for example, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can, you can give yourself the challenge of making a narrative or an idea of that or the impermanence of that or something, and then let your audience have a glimpse of that. And I guess your challenge is to give them something that they can take away and think about again the next day, or maybe 3 years time when maybe something happens and it brings back the that something that short had to give. So I don't know. I remember. I certainly. I mean, because I haven't made shorts myself since the early days. God, 20 years ago, I suppose now is the last time I made a short. But um, I remember being a bit of a control freak. So I both heavily relied on great designers and fantastic artists and comp artists and all of this. But at the same time, what I liked about shorts was that if things went wrong, I felt I could fix it myself. And I think that's what I felt. But it was interesting. I think one of the biggest kicks up the butt I ever had was on a short where one of my colleagues had made animated for a week on a scene, and it wasn't quite what I wanted, but I felt it wasn't quite what I wanted because I hadn't briefed them properly or I hadn't directed them properly. So then I felt an onus on me over the weekend to just fix the scene, and then on Monday I had the scene fixed. And again, looking back after 20 years, going, yeah, that's just different. That's not better. But I remember saying to the animator, like, oh, I fixed that. They would say, okay, like, can you tell me how, and I'll take another shot at this. And I went, no, there's no need. I fixed it. And I just, remember the look in their face because I had, you know, just, stood all over their sense of ownership on their work, not done what a director should do, which is communicate to somebody else so that you can empower them and get them to, or help them to do their job as best they can. And then they, like I said, they it's a true collaborative experience. So that was, it was a big kick up the butt and a big learning experience that I'm not the best person to do, especially animation where, as you say, like you do have to spend, if you're spending your week animating, then you get to make mistakes and pull back and go this way and go that way and really immerse yourself into something. If you're directing and trying to animate at the same time, you're probably not going to do a fabulous job. Or if you do a fabulous job in that scene, you're probably not directing. There's so many other things going wrong. So yeah, unless you are spreading it out over 20 years.
No, for sure. I think it's funny you say that because it reminded me as well of except this was in Jam. It was for a short project that I was working on and had a very similar experience. But it's one of those ones where you need that early on to grow as a director. Where I think we like worked really hard on an edit, and our editor was like really pulled out the stops. And we sent it off, and we got negative feedback about it, or it wasn't what they wanted. And I was like, oh, that was just a quick edit, don't worry. And I brushed it off very quickly, and then I was speaking to the editor after, and they're like, that was not a quick edit. I worked really hard on that. I was like, sorry, and I know you did. And it was like a very much one of those moments where like your words really matter and how you present yourself and your colleagues and your work. It's not as you might be a bit. Sorry, not you, myself. I'm a bit scattered and have been, I think, getting a bit better and a bit more confident in how I communicate with people. But yeah, very conscious of that always being a learning.
Oh no, it is, but it's interesting, right? Because you have the responsibility of your team if you're directing, and making sure, you take care of their work and you give them, make sure that everybody has a sense of ownership and that they're truly collaborative and that you're being able to take on the best ideas of the team and all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, you're the one that that has taken it all the way, maybe from the outline all the way through. So when a sound mixer says, okay, I'm going to pull this down, I'm going to push that up, you say no, because way back when we were thinking about the outline, this was so important for that character, and if you do that now, that messes with the through line or whatever. So, and sometimes you have to be the badass that kind of says, okay, I know you worked like 3 weeks on that, but the story is the only thing that matters at the end of the day, because we're all serving the audience at the end of the day. And so there's a balance to be struck. Neither of those things are 100% correct. There's a balance between the two, I guess.
Yes, definitely. I think so, for sure. And it's a funny one with animation because we're I think quite naturally maybe a little bit more introverted than say, I think people maybe in live action, or I think you have to be a bit more have a bit more of an external kind of force maybe working in live action. And so I think to then direct and team lead and supervise within animation and having those communication skills, it's something that maybe like especially if you just start an animation, I started just with my headphones on animating and not really chatting out to the larger kind of teams. And going from that to actually having to communicate across like multiple teams, you really need to get a bit of confidence in yourself and your ability to communicate as well. Simply.
No, for sure, and the role does change. You give me a flashback actually of actually Alan Shannon was my first director, as I worked on a short back way like before even Cartoon Saloon. I was working in Brown Bag for a year, and I worked on his short, The Last Elk, and I was an assistant, and so I would it was back in the paper days, so I would get the keys, and Alan would have the timing charts, and I'd kind of go through them and I'd look, and if I saw a mistake I'd kind of go over and I'd say, oh, there's a mistake or whatever. I remember him one time kind of turning around and saying, okay, if there's a mistake, just fix it, kind of thing. And I went, what? And I had to like level up in terms of like, okay, I actually have to think about what I'm doing a bit more, and not just like be in assistant mode, but actually say, okay, well, if something's not quite right, is there something I can do, kind of thing to help out here, because he was completely, he had a lot on, let's say. So it's interesting, like, when when you're in the headphone mode, and sometimes I'd love just to be in the headphone mode again, where I can be watching something on YouTube and then animating away or whatever. And when you're directing, you have to think all the time and think so much all the time, and then continually communicate what the film is about, why you're doing what you're doing, or like as in like some like why a layout artist, like what's most important in the sequence that you're just about to brief. Same with the animator, and all the way down through to score and all the rest of it. So it's a massive communication job. Much, I'd say, probably more so than in live action, because things are probably a bit more immediate there. But then also maybe the planning, well, it's different anyway for sure. But also, yeah, I mean, yeah, instead of talking to like one actor about a performance in a short film or something like that, you might be talking to 5 or 6 different animators, or 30 or 50 animators, or 50 animators, and English isn't the first language of some of them, and some of them might be in a different country. So like it's a massive, massive communication job.
Yes, no, definitely. You reminded me there. I did a couple of episodes on a live action series with Jam, got back in 2021. I think I only did maybe 3 episodes, and it was live action with then a crossover into kind of CG and VFX and so on. And the difference, I couldn't believe that it was like a completely different world. And not that animation doesn't run like a well-oiled machine, but an entire episode was done in a week. And it was like militant, like a militaristic operation. It was like a completely different vibe to kind of maybe floating about the desk, or here I'll pop over and have a chat at your computer, and we'll maybe work something out. We'll kind of figure it out on the screen. This was like bam bam bam, but like really impressive. It was just so impressive to see people with like a completely different skill set but very similarly minded. But yeah, the first couple of weeks I was like, whoa, the piece was just amazing. It was such a different sense of working, I guess.
Yeah, the prep I think you have to do for that, because your decisions are immediate. Everything is so expensive. Every minute is so expensive. And then, your decisions are final as well, because you can't, in animation, you can come back and say, that thing I said yesterday, I've changed my mind overnight kind of thing. It's like, no, so that's gone. We've moved on kind of thing. So yeah, it's not quite the same, the same thing. With your shorts, do you like, where do your ideas come from?
Oh wow. I don't. Yeah, I guess it kind of varies. Like I use my very first one, Wireman, was a framework short, and that came from a story that my dad was telling me about growing up in Leitrim in like the 60s, and I kind of thought everywhere in the 60s was the same. It was just kind of like funky patterns. It's probably very tinged by American TV. But yeah, in the 60s in Leitrim, they like just got electricity basically. I think it was like maybe 40 years after the rest of Ireland. One of the last places, and yeah, he was just describing that like how people were very much kind of very distrusting of it, and I love that. I'm quite a nostalgic kind of person, so the idea of being able to build a story with our writer Paul Cahill into something. I love when stories have keeping a personal touch to your stories. I guess it was the same with Warrior World, that was written by Hugh O'Connor. Like that came from a very personal place for him. I think he described it as like an introvert's worst nightmare. This idea that everyone's thoughts could be seen over your heads. And again, it's I think it was around the time of COVID as well that we were really delving into the development. So we were all very much kind of locked away, reliant on our screens, looking at everything through these little frames. So yeah, very selfishly, they're mostly from personal experiences, but I think that's a very common thread maybe through us creatives.
And how, right, so because I'm sure you're an incredibly creative person, so you probably have about 5 ideas, I would say, a day that I could make into a short film kind of thing if you told me about them. So how do you choose then, right? Because you're sure, I don't know how long how long did Wireman take you, for example?
Did get that done. Sorry, I sound so surprised. We got that done in a year. So we got the Frameworks Fund, and we're able to deliver it the following year in time for Galway, which didn't feel like at the time that we would be able to do. And luckily, yeah, it all worked out, and we got that kind of together. But I think that was one that I pitched back when I was saying I was on the graduate scheme. I didn't know if I was going to be kept on afterwards, so I went and pitched for Frameworks. And then got this graduate scheme. The 6 months kind of extended, and then also got Frameworks. And you're like, oh no, too many good things. But yeah, so that was one. I'd been developing that with a writer Paul and a producer Dave, who I met back in the days of Film Base, who I'm sure people will remember fondly. So they were doing a scheme, and I think it was like a short film scheme. It was a mix of like live action. I think we were the only animated short there, and we got to I think the final like 5 people or so and didn't get that, but we're like, we developed it for a good year, so we're gonna go make it, let's do it. So it took maybe a year to produce and maybe like a year or so to kind of develop the idea and get it pitched and accepted and everything. So and this Warrior World was a little bit longer. It was I think we started developing that basically after maybe 2019. Kind of went for funding through the BFI first, and because I was based in Belfast, and then we didn't get that. I think we were called in for some interviews. Didn't get chosen for the BFI, and then submitted to Screen Ireland. But they very luckily, I think after like 2 to 3 years developing it, we were delighted that they took it on, and we got to make the shorts. So that was a bit longer, and it took us 2 years to make. I think just across different projects and different work commitments.
Well, thank you, Screen Ireland. I'm so glad it exists because it's gorgeous. It's really, really beautiful and really universal. And again, like that's what I suppose that's the first one that really struck me as just your economy, but like in the best possible way as a filmmaker, just knowing because it's a complex enough, idea, and it's and as you say, like it's like, oh, will my audience get it, or will they just be going, what the hell's going on here, kind of thing, this bubble over this person's head. But it's amazing what the human imagination will go. If you go to a stage play and 5 people dressed in blue can become a wave, and I believe that somebody is going, that there's a stormy sea on the stage or whatever. If somebody, if you've got a group of people who believe it themselves while they do it. So once you trust that, it's incredible, and then you connect with your audiences in such an incredible way. When was the first time you watched your film with an audience? Any film or any piece of work that you did with an audience?
Oh my gosh, I think it would have been probably my grad film, and that was terrifying. Like that would have been like one of those ones where you hated it for a good year. You're like, oh my God, can't believe this is like the final. Then you also thought that was going to be your magnum opus when you were like leaving college. Like, this is the one chance I'll get to make a short film. And for anyone listening, it's not. You can make shorts anytime you want. It's great. There's so much funding available and everything. But I think my grad film, happy to watch that in front of your peers. And I think it was like at the Dublin Animation Festival maybe. So it was like your family was there. There was like, that was the kind of the most, probably the scariest one. And then luckily the other 2 were in Galway, so you were kind of surrounded by other people who'd also submitted their work. So there's this general air of everyone having a bit of nerves, a bit of excitement. So it was a nice, there was kind of a little bit more. Still, your nerves were there, but it was more communal, I guess.
When you're pitching something, so like an idea for a short, and you might try it in front of your colleagues. So I try your pitch in front of your colleagues before you go to the funding organization or whatever. Which is more difficult for you, like your peer group or your colleagues or whatever, or the whatever panel of funding bodies or whatever?
I'd say your peer group, I think, because you're kind of obviously if you're in front of a panel and they ask you a question, you can't be kind of like, well, it's clearly this. It's like, how do you not get it? It's this. Well, like your friends will just tell you, they're like, that's not clear. That doesn't make sense. Like, why are they doing this? What's this? Like, what's the whole motive behind this? And you really I think that's maybe a bit harder, because then you're also I think they're going to be your audience maybe as well, like you're kind of your peer group. So and also I think if you get your parents or a family member in there who has no kind of relationship with animation, that is how you really know. I've had a good few kind of moments of showing my family this, like, oh, this is the work. Oh, sorry, this is the work that like we spent ages making. They're like, oh yeah. I get it. Yeah, cool. Very like, and it's just it's too artsy, or it's too this. It's like
no, I
peel it back a little bit.
I think honestly, family are probably the worst. I've had like I am. So anyway, how are you? Kind of going, this is I just spent a year on or whatever.
Yeah, like you got a year making this 5-minute thing, and you're like, yeah,
just like
that's why I like the chose.
But it's funny though, because as well, I think when you're if you're asked to look at somebody else, so if you like somebody's going for funding for something, or they've got a pitch ready, and they ask you to be part of like the audience for it, and or like so they can see how the pitch is working, it is a responsibility to be truthful. but positive and encouraging and empowering, and do it in a way like, because no matter what, or if somebody shows you their script or something like that, it's a skill to be able to talk about it in a constructive way that's not going to pull somebody down or take their kind of creative energy, because everybody is so vulnerable in that whole creative space. And if you're allowed into that space, it's great. But yeah, I think you do have to be really careful, because you can yeah, you can really take the energy out of somebody's idea or their work or whatever, just by yeah, not being careful how you couch what you say, I suppose, or whatever.
I think especially I feel like with writing and with scripts like that, I think someone's kind of sat and like really poured their heart into something. And I know if you're coming up with designs, and kind of a lot of my friends would maybe start with a character and then kind of build a story around the character, and that kind of way. I generally will just like write a lot, and so kind of almost like sharing that with people is like that's really just come straight from yourself first, and then you attach the characters to it. So yeah, this is it's quite vulnerable having to share that with people. Because you in saloon, and I'm sure like just yourself in general, I say you get like a lot of people kind of coming to you for advice on ideas and with pitches and for shorts, for features, for everything. Like
for sure, yeah. And we get people who pitch to us, but we generally don't we don't really look at things much outside of ourselves, unless like it's a favor kind of thing. We do try and kind of develop things more or less within the studio, or else, with co-producers, kind of similar enough kind of studios to ourselves. But yeah, no, within the studio, then of course, like there, lots of people have their own ambitions and personal ambitions, and they have their own areas of interest, and certainly will work within that. And then of course, yeah, when we're given feedback on things, like if I'm with my producer hat on, kind of trying to give notes not from a director's perspective, so not saying, okay, well, this is what I do in that situation or whatever, because they're like, oftentimes actually, even as a director, I won't particularly seek out the opinion of other directors for something. I will go and talk to an editor, or actors, or visual people or something, rather than other directors, because oftentimes directors can take that hat off and they all they can see when they're like, they've got a scene, or they've got a scene in front of them, and something's not working with it. So it takes a huge amount of skill. And there's a lot of, like, I've met some really fabulous story people who are able to sit with a director and say, okay, well, what is it that you're going for with this, and what does this really mean to you? And then they can, even though they've got like 5 or 6 solutions in the back of their own head, they don't say any of those, or they don't lead the director in that way at all. They just prepare a path for them, or like a set of paths or whatever. That's not even a good analogy. They're able to make the director come up with their own solution that works for whatever it is that's bubbling up for them, that they probably haven't even articulated, to anyone. So that's an incredible skill. I don't think I have that, but like there are a lot of really good story people, and a lot of them are actually editors or heads of story, storyboarders, who instead of just bulldozing ahead with, no, this is the solution, and there you go, kind of thing. If you don't take it, you're, you know, and they're actually able to instead facilitate a vision. And then if they're part of that project, that's actually better for the project as well, because your audience, even though they mightn't be like story experts or anything like that, like they'll know the difference. They'll be able to, if something isn't sitting right, or it feels like it's coming from a different voice all of a sudden, which is whatever, like a thing that solves the plot problem but mightn't actually feel aligned, they can sense it, and it just pushes them a bit further away from the screen, and they don't know why, but they just don't connect, so it's interesting.
For sure. I think it's something I think it was mostly again over COVID, but watching so many additional shows and so on. But we got very good at kind of spotting things for like, or when you were suddenly pushed out of a show, if you were watching something or watching, that there's some amazing work that was produced over lockdown and that aired over lockdown. But I did catch myself a number of times, for probably the first time in a long time, like stepping back and being like, oh no, this is, yeah, like you're just disconnecting as someone in an audience, kind of watching work that you've been really loving for a while. But when you feel that disconnect, it's quite jarring. And then it also makes you then think, okay, I don't want that to happen. If I make something, you really want to kind of keep people involved.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. And I think like all stories and all, everything gets into issues. That's, you do your first draft of something and you might think it's awful or you might think it's great or whatever, but like by draft 6 or whatever, you'll have, it'll all have fallen apart on you. And then if you get into storyboarding, it'll all have fallen apart on you again. And then you'll be recording actors and trying to look like you know what you're doing. And they'll ask a really simple question that actually pulls on a thread that, like, could, rip the whole thing apart. So yeah, it's an interesting process, all right, for sure. Um, and so, coming from your like your background in Dunleary and that, like, so, uh, and now you say like you write a lot. Like, so if you're working through a story, you'll come at it from a writer's perspective and not from like a drawing a character and then kind of maybe storyboarding out from that or whatever. Was that something that was always the way, or did it change at a certain point?
And I do think like it was maybe kind of where it was. I think it's been always the way. To be honest, I'm like getting really introspective now. I'm trying to think back. Yeah, I always had like these like little notebooks from Tiger. They did these little packs of little brown notebooks, and I think I would just ended up like writing down thoughts more so, and like I kind of draw the same kind of characters over and over once it's up, but it's trying to find the character to fit the story. And I guess my style was always of drawing has never really changed too much. So I've always kind of had this one design style. So I think I knew that whatever idea I came up with, it would just then be melded into that design style or style of drawing. But yeah, I think it's just bullet point things, and it's almost like stream of consciousness, and of just kind of like, oh, here's an idea, and if that lasted the next day, I'd go back, look at them, and pick 2 or 3, and then kind of continue with those, see if I could develop those, and kind of go back and pick. It would kind of just filter out the ones that were just kind of rubbish. We're not rubbish, but we're just kind of like a single sentence that couldn't actually go anywhere. But yeah, I think writing more so, not in like a kind of professional script writing way, but yeah, just jotting down ideas came more naturally, maybe, I think, for me. Did you have a preferable way of working, like, or did you find yourself just drawing?
I like to think that I write, but I don't really, and I often get I often get tied up with language. Like, I get quite flowery in the way that I write, and I can fall in love with the way that I write rather than the content of what I'm writing, I guess, kind of. So where I do the really heavy, hard work, I think, is in storyboard, animatic, and editing. So especially with editing, I tend to rip things apart, and in ways I can actually be a little bit complacent with screenwriting or working with a script writer and think, oh, yeah, I'll fix it in animatic, which is really not a good not a good attitude to have. But it's because I work so quickly in when I'm editing, and I oftentimes change dialogue edit, because when you're, especially if you get to work with a couple of concept artists as well as storyboard artists, the visual possibilities of what you can do, I suppose. The thing, I think animation writers can be a bit different than live action writers in that, like, they tend not to animation, or good writers for animation tend not to spend a lot of time with like writing lines of dialogue going, wow, that sunset is really beautiful. They have a way of in the description, saying something about that sunset that will set a concept artist off doing amazing work. And then that your voice actor is never going to need to say, wow, what a beautiful sunset, because there will be a gorgeous environment created, sparked from whatever that concept artist got from what the screenwriter wrote in the description instead. The best screenwriters, I think, for animation that I've come across are kind of really poetic and visual in the way that they think. Sometimes you have screenwriters who just, they say, okay, a fight happens kind of thing, and that's going to be like 3 minutes in a film or something. But the really good visual ones won't try and say, okay, cut here and cut there, and it's a mid shot here and that, whatever. But they kind of describe things in a way that makes you think that they have this visualized in their head, and then they understand they understand what animation can bring, I suppose. So no, I guess where I'm most active and digging at things and throwing out things and getting new things in a lot is in edit, because it's so important for animation, because you have to edit, of course, in animation before, you don't, it's not something that you do like in live action after you shoot and you got lots of coverage and all this kind of stuff, and then you go and refine your story kind of. In animation, you have to do that after the storyboard stage before you get into animation, because you can't afford, of course, to be shooting footage or whatever, whatever. Yeah, you just can't do that.
No, for sure. That's partly the reason that our second short was delayed. The storyboard process just took me much longer than I thought it was. It was maybe 7 pages with no dialogues, so it was just description, and he had built this really lovely world. And I think just visually, I boarded it the whole thing, and it was running way too long. And parts we were like, okay, we have to start chopping things, and it was almost like we started script editing after I'd boarded. So we were like editing the script and chopping it down, trying to condense it, and then I was reboarding it, and then we were editing it. It was a questionable process. I probably wouldn't recommend. Definitely kind of to do that almost in reverse would have been smart. But I do completely understand what you mean though about like having to get it down visually and start messing with it, and the timing and the pacing. I think that having that control with your visuals is so important. It's so
absolutely,
get really sucked into it and you don't realize it, and then but when you have to redo the whole thing, you're kind of like, it's a little bit heartbreaking. But
I don't know. I mean, it's all. I mean, yeah, and like you think, okay, if we get it perfect in the screenplay, and then we just have to, make one animatic or whatever. But I think things are going to fall apart anyway, and then you are going to go back to outline on part of the screenplay kind of thing. It's just part of the process. I don't trust films or stories and I've seen a couple that you feel like, oh wow, that looks like they animated the first draft, or that looks like, they just recorded the voices from the screenplay and then just storyboarded that, and that was that kind of thing, and so like you can tell the ones where people don't really kind of reassess as you need to, I think, when otherwise you're, like I said, you're not really letting animation do what it's best at, which is creating a really amazing environment where you can kind of really explore a third space, as your shorts do, right? Where you're like able to you're able to kind of make this space that's not really reality, but it's not really fully imagined, and you feel the mortal vulnerability of the characters, even though they're very simplistic in ways, but in other ways that makes me identify with the characters more than if they were 3D rendered, perfect with freckles and all this kind of stuff. Like, I think that the simplified versions are more universal in a funny old way, isn't it? Yeah.
It is wonderful that you can put like 2 dots into a circle and everyone's like, oh, like there's a couple person. Yeah, that's it is kind of crazy. It's one of the great things. So I think with animation, it was something we'd like learned maybe, gosh, in maybe like first or second year that like that just like we find faces in things that don't even have faces just because we're constantly looking for that connection. That's like, I love that idea.
Absolutely.
Much more minimal I could make it, but it's
yeah, but then you got lovely moments where, and especially even if like your eyes are simplified down to dots and no whites, for the eyes. So, but then being able to bring expression into that lets your audience kind of come forward and imagine what's there without being like, so massively specific that it just feels like it belongs to that character and not to us as viewers. What's next for you then? What would you like to do next, Jess?
I'm kind of torn. So really enjoying TV animation at the moment. This is my first gig doing like episode directing for across the full series, and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, I love the pace of it. It's like especially when we've now got multiple episodes on the go at once, and you're across from animatics all the way through like every department, and we finally are kind of hitting our like kind of final comp stage, and I really enjoy that pace and being busy every day. I think I like the control you have with short films, and like it's it's a bit of a different ballpark, but I think that structure, or lacking that structure, or where it's very much a self-imposed kind of structure for short films, that you have to be really kind of on the ball and dedicated and focused on your work. Or I think that's where I maybe was lacking a little bit in the last two. I was juggling it with a day job, and I don't think I personally can creatively work as well that way. But it's on the other hand, then yeah, doing the episode directing it's kind of hitting all those boxes, ticking all those boxes for me.
Hitting them with a mallet.
Yeah, that's it. Smashing. And what about you, Nora? Are you have a couple of things up or?
I do, yeah. Well, like again, with all the different hats on in Cartoon Saloon, where I'm helping on a little bit with Louise Bagnall, as you mentioned earlier. She is making her feature directorial debut with a film called Julian, which is based on a book by Jessica Love called Julian is a Mermaid, about a young boy visiting his grandmother in Brooklyn, and he hasn't had that much of a relationship with her before. So it's a real, very gentle, beautiful, kind of gorgeously portrayed story of kind of, these two characters kind of discovering each other, and kind of, not really with or taking off the kind of expectation goggles, and actually seeing each other for who they truly are, both of them. And it's really really beautiful in so many levels, and it's lovely seeing the team working away, and it's incredibly inspiring. So yeah, Louise is working on that. Tom's working on a new film. We have a couple of series going on. Tom is in early development with a new, again, really gorgeous story. And then I'm starting to write. I'm trying to do the thing that I'm most afraid of. So, yeah, I've always, again, like I said, I kind of come at writing the hard way and probably the wrong way in the edit. So I wanted to see if I can come at it the right way for once. And yeah, so I'm just beginning a project, and yeah, really yeah, it's kind of exciting. It's interesting, yeah, because I like you started out, animating, and I used to love the specificity of performance, and being able to get a little bit of nuance into a character that might echo into what another animator and another sequence of another part of the film, what they were doing. And I used to love that. And now I know, after many years of just only, like, the only time I get to touch animation now is to fix, something, but not in the way that, like, I described earlier on, where I literally took it off someone. But like, if I really can't describe something, or if we run out of time and whatever, the money and all the rest of it, I end up doing a little bit of animation. But I wouldn't take something from kind of soup to nuts anymore in terms of animation. But I love watching performance. Like, I love listening to voice actors in the booth. I love directing actors, and helping them with their imaginations get to where they need to be in terms of getting the performance that I can take back to the animators. And then, because I always feel like that's such a huge sense of responsibility when you have to work with actors to get a performance that an animator can spend a week doing 6 or 7 seconds or whatever. That's a big one.
No, it is. It's huge. I love though that, so you can have like one thing you're like, oh, I'm very excited about this, but there's always like five other, like, I think that like what you've just described is exactly what I love about directing, and having that input, even slightly in so many different different kind of aspects of the role. And I think, yeah, it's so, I can't imagine kind of just going back to one thing now. It's like it's almost like you've been exposed to everything. And yeah, but like getting the chance to, and I'd say it's amazing getting the chance to work with so many creatives as well, like seeing Louise's work, but like the fact that you can rattle off like, say, 3 or 4 amazing projects that are all happening at once, it's so exciting, I think, especially for Irish animation in general. But like, since I think Louise's like late afternoon, I've watched that don't know how many times, but I can only imagine what Julian would be like if that's what she can do with a short. Well, future would be an amazing space.
Yeah, she's such a sensitive and emotionally intelligent director. I think it's I can't wait.
Yeah,
but I get to watch it be made. So
I can't imagine having that like behind the curtain kind of like experience and getting to see that. But hopefully it'll be
you'll have to come down, Jess. I'll give you the door code and you come in.
Yes, oh my God, you won't be getting rid of me though.
Super. Well, listen, it was lovely chatting to you, and yeah, you must come down to Kilkenny. We'd love to see you down.
100%. No, thank you so much, and this was really honestly the most wonderful afternoon. I'm getting to talk to you. It's been a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, likewise. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you for listening. This podcast has been made possible with the support of Screen Ireland.
So make sure to visit filmireland.ie, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and find out more about what's going on in Irish cinema and never miss another podcast.